Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Deanna, you're watching Orchid. Today I have decided, since Maisie is in daycare and I start work next week and this is my one free day, that I might try and repot a few orchids. Now, I need to repot pretty much every single orchid in this shade house, and I have not counted how many orchids there are, but it's well above 200, that's what I would say. So I clearly can't repot 200 orchids today or even this year, but look, yeah, it's safe to say that they all do eventually need repotting probably this year. That probably won't happen. So instead of actually doing a repotting video today, because well, that would be challenging. I think the repots just need to happen, and it takes actually a lot of time to set the camera up and film the repottings. I thought I would go through reasons why you might need to repot your orchids, show you some examples, because it's very likely that I will have examples of orchids that need repotting for various reasons, and I guess how to maybe prioritize sorting out what is most urgent. And yeah, we'll choose some orchids together that I can hopefully repot today. In the meantime, if you're wondering, this is Ida Elizabeth Enchanting. She's a gorgeous, fragrant orchid that's open up at the moment. She's a very good size. You can see my hand there. She was an orchid that was doing pretty poorly for a little while there, but the last 2 years she's really picked up her health, and that's a really nice bloom. So one reason you might need to repot your orchids is because of media breakdown. To some degree, all these sort of epiphytic orchids and even semi-terrestrial orchids, we're going to be using a bark mixture. Now that's not always the case. So there is organic and inorganic media, and organic media is like bark, sphagnum. They're natural products and they will eventually break down. But there's obviously differing grades and qualities. Overall, sphagnum, no matter what quality, is going to break down relatively quickly, especially if it's kept quite wet a lot of the time. And then depending on the grade of bark, you might get 3 to 5 years. So good quality large orchiata bark will take longer to break down. Organic media, and that's going to be stuff like leca, perlite, charcoal, they don't really break down, and as long as you're flushing regularly, you shouldn't get too much residue build up or anything in those ones. So they can technically last a very long time, and you don't necessarily need to repot because that media is breaking down. But if your media is breaking down, then what happens is it can change the pH of what the roots are sitting in, so it will become more acidic, and the roots will not perform adequately. They won't be able to absorb their nutrients adequately, and eventually it will result in a declining orchid. The other thing is, as the media breaks down, it becomes finer and retains more water, and yeah, it becomes less well draining. So let's have a look down here, because here's a perfect example of one that needs repotting. This is a little Phalaenopsis cakey, which hasn't done much since I got it from Bailey. Must have been early last year. I did do a video, which I'll link. That is in pure sphagnum. It's never been repotted by me. It was inside, and it was doing quite well inside really, but now that it's outside, it can't stay in this sphagnum. It is soaking wet, if you can see that. So I am going to repot that one today. The second reason you might need to repot is pest infestations. So I'm talking like snails, maybe insects, but particularly things like scale, like we have back here. That's a pretty bad scale infection combined with some back bulb rotting. So I mean, you can treat pests topically, but by repotting it allows you to get rid of any severely damaged bulbs. Sometimes you're better off just trying to get rid of those rather than cleaning them up. but it also allows you to get to the base of the orchid. And a lot of these oncidiums aren't doing fantastically anymore. It's just been a very, very wet summer, and basically I used to put a lot of sphagnum in these mixes while they were inside, and that worked really well when I was growing them inside, but now it results in a less well draining media and soggy roots out here actually. When I do get around to repotting stuff, I will be using very little, if any, sphagnum at all anymore. It'll be primarily orchiata bark and those premixes that I own. So here we go. This is Ballara Matthias Glamour doing very, very badly. So I'll go over like prioritizing and stuff, but I've kind of already pre-chosen the few orchids that I'm going to repot today, and this is definitely one of them. It's very, very badly infected with scale. You can see there, and you can see on the other side of there that that is like snow. It looks terrible, and whether I can save this or not, I'm not sure. I've always had troubles with this plant. It's had two directions of growth, and one has always been kind of healthier than the other, but now it does look like it's doing very badly, so we'll see what we can do there. So the third reason you would want to repot goes hand in hand with what's happening with this orchid is rotting issues, so infective issues. That might be from bacterial or fungal problems. This is a little bit of a chicken versus egg thing. So, you know, when you've got back bulb rot, then obviously your defenses, kind of like, you know, if you've got a cut in your skin, but your defenses are down, and it just makes it easier for pests to come in, and vice versa. If you've got pests, then that makes you more susceptible to these bacterial and fungal infections, combined with the fact that probably it's needed repotting for a little while. This one desperately needs a repot. Bacterial infections tend to spread quickly, and I'll show you one that I was planning to repot today, but I think it's too late, and I'm going to lose this orchid, but it's one of my Phragmipediums. You can see that I've lost one whole growth there, and this one is rotting off, so that's gone. I probably put too much slow release orchid fertilizer in there as well, but yeah, unfortunately I think I've gotten to this one a bit too late. And look, at first conditions were absolutely perfect during spring in this shade house, but through summer, these are the harshest months in Queensland. No matter where I'm growing, it is super hot. Like the temperatures in the high 30s, the humidity is just soaring. Harsh conditions of rain, then full 30-degree sun, and then lack of airflow. And so you get, instead of dehydration and keeping up with your watering being a problem, it becomes a bit of a melting pot for fungal infections and things like that. So yes, we're always battling a really nice, perfect environment for our orchids, but weather changes, temperature changes, and we can only do what we can do, and not all these orchids are going to make it in the long run, but hopefully most of them will enjoy these sort of very tropical conditions, and they will start to thrive, but they do have to get through these really hot months. And I'll do an update of the Phalaenopsis as well, because this is going to be the most trying time for these guys as well, because it can get really, really hot and very sunny and bright out here through January, February. So reason number 4 for repotting your orchid is because it has outgrown its pot. Now, that is a lot of these orchids, especially the Cattleyas. There are a lot of them just growing right out of the pot. A lot of them are stuck to the trays that they're on. Look at that one. But a lot of them are big, and I don't have time to deal with them today. So the good thing about Cattleya is that they are still being healthy growing out of the pot. So I've got a little bit of time still to let them be and choose orchids that need repotting a bit more desperately. So here's an orchid that is outgrowing its pot big time. It's losing its back bulbs, and basically you can see that, I mean, there's media breakdown in there as well, so it's a number of reasons, but it has nowhere really for new growths to grow. My Shari baby as well falls into this category. It is just bursting out of the pot. There's nowhere else for the roots to grow. And another one I'm going to choose is actually this one. The name of this one is, you guys will have to read that, Laelia Lyonsii, cross with Myrmecophila tibicinus. So check out this one. If you can imagine, when I first pot this up, or repot it when I got it, it was just a few little bulbs, and now look at the size of these bulbs and look at the roots. And this is an old party cup that I used to use years ago, so it's been a very, very long time. It's completely outgrowing the pot. There's nowhere else for those roots to go. It's a good time to repot because it's got 2 little growths, but I'm just having trouble actually putting this anywhere without worrying that those new growths are going to break off. So it's actually looking otherwise very healthy, but I'm going to probably pot this one up. Now, the next reason that you might need to repot is that your orchids are inappropriately potted. So my Stanhopias have all been on the list to be repotted because these guys grow their flower spikes from underneath, so they drop their flower spikes, but if the holes down the bottom underneath the pot aren't big enough, the spikes can't come through, so you just don't get flowerings. And look at the way they grow. That's a new growth down there, and it's just coming out the side. So those slats on the side just don't allow for the bulbs to grow properly. So they all need repotting, none of which I'm going to do today. Here is a poor little Vanda that needs a repotting because look what's happened. The flower spike has curled up all around inside the pot. So this is Rhynchostylis retusa, and it is a first blooming, and I did not see the spike developing. I found it on New Year's Eve and I was very sad, but there was just no point in trying to release these blooms. Look, there's some even growing down the bottom there. So once this finishes flowering, along with a couple of other Vandas, they'll need to be put into more appropriate pots, but that is much less urgent because they're still growing okay. Now, the 6th reason that you might need to repot is because of the type of orchid itself. So, as I mentioned, most of the orchids I'm growing are epiphytic orchids, but there's a bunch of terrestrial and semi-terrestrial orchids. Their roots do not grow outside of media, outside of the pot, and just from experience, Paphiopedilums need quite frequent repotting because they grow on like the forest floors, and usually their bases are covered, and you might be able to see there that there's an exposed root there and it just has stopped growing. And basically what happens is they push down and you start losing these bottom leaves, and then the base of the Paphiopedilum becomes exposed, and they become a bit loose in their pot. They aren't able to produce new roots that go down into the media to stabilize the plant, and they eventually decline. So I'll probably repot this Paphiopedilum today. So the ideal spot I find to pot the Paphiopedilum up is where those first leaves sort of join up at that point there. So this is about 1 centimetre too low, so it's going to start producing new roots from around here, and they're just going to terminate and not do very well. So yes, I do find that in an ideal world, Paphiopedilums do need annual repotting. Now, the last reason that I have that I'm going to repot some of these is because they have never been repotted since I got them. And if you can imagine, I did not get any new orchids except for some that my friends gave me when Maisie was born. So I didn't get any new orchids last year in 2021. There are still orchids in their original pots from 2020. So this is one of them. This Oncidium is growing completely out of the pot and it needs a repot. It's currently in flower and it's not doing horribly, so I'm actually not going to do it today, but it will be right at the top of round 2. It's just a little bit of an awkward growth pattern, so I'm going to need quite a big pot and probably a little bit of time to tidy it up as well, so time is not on my side today. However, here is a catasetum that is still in its original pot, tight sphagnum, and this will be a quick one. It just needs to be pretty much up-potted because, yeah, the new roots just aren't quite making it down very well. We just need to give it a good shot and give it a bigger pot. Just on that note, this is one that I repotted last week, or pretty much up-potted, this catasetum. Not the best time to be repotting or up-potting, but it was also in this little, I don't know, is it 1 inch, 1.5 inch pot as well. I must have missed that one, but this one was repotted into a fairly bigger container actually, and it's been a week and it seems to be doing okay. So guys, these are the plants that I'll be repotting today. So I've got a couple of Paphiopedilums because they may not look too bad now, but they are a little bit loose in their pots and they do need that repotting. Plus I think they're going to be fairly easy to repot, so that's why I've chosen them today as well. But in terms of prioritizing, you know, you got to weigh up what you think you can do and just be realistic with your time constraints. I used to have all the time in the world, so I used to do, you know, big mass repots and stuff, but these are all different types of plants, and I'm just going on their need mostly. So declining plants right at the top of the list. If you think that they're going to go downhill and not survive the next 3 to 6 months, they need to be right up the top of your lists. And infections and pests, they're going to be the big players that make that decision for you. So they generally will need treating as soon as you can. The next most important reasons would be like the inappropriate medium. So these are both in dense sphagnum in their original pots. They need to be changed over to a little bit of a bark mix, an area mix, a more well draining mix. And I guess the third is like this severe overcrowding in the pots. So yes, and in terms of how I'm going to do it, well, I've got a whole bunch of repotting videos from a couple of years ago, and that is how you should repot. You should, you know, take your time. You should try and remove old media, balancing, like minimizing your root disturbance, especially for the cat layer types, I think. But this is going to be a focus on removal of bad media, cleaning up of pests and any infections and things like that, repotting mainly just into bark, not making any fancy mixtures up, and I'm going to be up-potting just in general rather than focusing on a lot of media removal from now on. And once they're all repotted, I will catch up with you guys again. So I'm starting with the 4 easiest orchids, the 2 Paphiopedilums, the catasetum, which should be an easy pot. I will see how those newer roots take. They're actually from last year's growth. They may not transition very well into the new media, but we'll see. It wasn't going to do very well in that little plastic pot with all that sphagnum, so the roots on the little Phalaenopsis look good. So yeah, we'll pot those up first and then we'll move on to the trickier ones. So really quick halfway update, although I think this is just the easy stuff done. These guys have been repotted. There's a little Phalaenopsis there. So the Phalaenopsis and the catasetum were in pure sphagnum. I have still mixed a little bit of sphagnum through along with a small bark perlite and charcoal mix, and these guys are in a mix of small and medium size. So they're currently soaking, and I do this pretty routinely in some sea salt, just a seaweed solution, but I've also added this stuff which I bought a little while ago but haven't used yet. It's oxynone, just a root hormone stimulant, and the concentration is 1 ml per litre, so I just mixed 1 ml into here along with a tiny few drops of sea salt, and yeah, for whatever it's worth. Anyway, what I really wanted to show you guys is how bad this Oncidium is. So I haven't unpotted those 2 yet. They shouldn't be too bad. This is really bad. So this one is the Bollara Matthias Glamour. It's broken into 2 parts, and you can see the back bulbs on both parts are not good. This is the better half, if you can believe that, and you can see the scale in there. It's got a few new little roots coming through. These two back bulbs are all but gone, and it's got one not great back bulb there with a bit of scale on it, and this one is possibly salvageable while this has time to root. This side, look how bad that scale is. I don't think I'm going to keep it. A scale is just one of those pests I find so difficult to get rid of completely. So I can clean all that manually. I can treat it with a pesticide, but it just comes back. It just a little bit hides and it comes back up. The plant is weak. It's going to be hard enough to keep the scale off this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this half. It's gone. I can't be bothered dealing with that. And this side, well, we'll put it in a nice small pot with some small bark, and in usual circumstances I would probably keep it inside, and baby it, but I've got another baby to look after, so this is going straight back in the shade house in a protected spot, like near the fowls probably, so it can have the best chance, I guess, of rooting and maybe re-establishing, hopefully, and hopefully a good cleanup and pesticide treatment, and probably a little bit of fungicide treatment as well. Hey everyone, apologies if there's a little bit of noise from the wind, but I am done. It is 4:45. I've got enough time to shower and go pick up Maisie from daycare, and I have repotted 7 orchids, which doesn't sound like a very big accomplishment, but it is actually a huge accomplishment for me because I haven't repotted in so long. So 7 down, I don't know, 250 to go. That's fine. At least these guys are all done. So these ones are still soaking. I can't believe this one is in like a 15 centimeter pot now. So it started off in a little party cup, and I'll put a picture up, but I couldn't actually get it out, so I had to break the plastic on the pot to get it out. And it started off as just such a small seedling. It's got 2 directions of growth, so it's basically just been up potted. I did not bother removing any of the old media really, so there's still a little bit of old media in the middle, but it's in a huge pot now. Shouldn't really matter if you overpot things slightly if you've got a large mix and a well draining pot. I suspect these guys in the shade house will grow really quickly, so I don't want to pot them too small, especially if they're healthy and they're growing well. So this one, I did lose the tag, but I had a look through my notes and I think it's Paf Nakagawa Delight, and it was just a little seedling as well at the old place. It's growing fairly well out there in the shade house. Here's the little Phalaenopsis, and it's the Cataceta. I don't have the tag anymore for this one, so we'll just have to see what happens there. Dendrobium Linleyi. So it had lost quite a lot of the old back bulbs. Even these, I could probably have removed them, but I did remove quite a lot of old desiccated back bulbs. There's one in there, as you can see, but it's starting to sort of grow back around this way. Some of the new growths are coming backwards, so I did pot it pretty centrally so there's space all around for it to grow. It's got quite clustered, tight growth habit, so this should hopefully still last a couple of years. Paf Callosum crossed with Robilenii. It's split from a mother plant. I reckon it will probably flower this year or next. So it's pretty much pot up to where those first leaves overlap. And when you pot the Paphiopedilums, I'll put an old repotting video up here, but don't worry if your lower leaves are a little bit buried. It's more important to pot them a little bit deeper rather than high. Otherwise the new roots just won't be able to take a hold and they'll die off. The last and the saddest one, this is all that remains of my Bollara Matthias Glamour. I don't have such high hopes for it. I'm actually going to soak it in this solution overnight and put it inside and then put it out in the shade house tomorrow. It looks bad. It looks bad. There's a lot of scale. I removed one of the leaves and there's a lot of scale underneath here as well. So we'll see. It's just in a small bark mix now, and it'll go out into the shade house tomorrow, and I'll keep you guys updated on it. Anyway guys, a bit of a mishmash video, not really a repotting video, more like a hooray I got some repotting done video, and we can follow these guys and see how they go out in the shade house. But I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, and happy growing until I see you next time. Bye.